we've got Tom Heath on the show. So welcome, Tom.
Great to be here.
You spent the last decade, you've been kind of working for a large global organisation.
That's right.
Helping a company called Arup sort of navigate that shift from data to AI, and you were the global director of data science and AI for Arup. Some of your key responsibilities, shaping the organisation's AI strategy, building out their global capability in data science, machine learning, helping bring AI into the sort of day-to-day work of sort of thousands of people, I guess, across the business. Because I think Arup have circa 18,000 employees.
18,000 or so globally. That's right.
Yeah. And what I think makes your background particularly interesting, Tom, is you've kind of sat across technology, leadership, organisational change. You've worn obviously a number of hats. Kind of sort of PhD, senior research data science background. And you've worked very closely with like the executive boards. You've helped secure investment into AI. You've built teams and capability programs across the sort of entire organization at Arup, and you've been really helping translate those technologies into operational impact. So I think it would be great for us to cover what you've learned leading AI initiatives inside large and complex organizations, what works, what doesn't, what data leaders should be thinking about as AI becomes a core part of how their business operates. So let's start with your journey, Tom. Let's talk about looking back over your career. What's kind of originally pulled you into the world of data and AI?
Yeah, great place to start. Thanks, Dan. Well, it's lovely to be here. Really pleased to be a guest on the podcast. Big fan of your work, the podcast, and great conversations that you've had in the series, many episodes to date. So,
excellent.
Yeah. So there's I think I've got an interesting background that brings something that's a bit novel, a bit different in the space of AI. As you mentioned, I have a PhD in computer science, but my original kind of educational and professional journey started off studying psychology back in the late 90s as an undergrad student, and that was focused very much on cognitive and neuropsychology. So in those days, we had some modules around neural networks, which was a pretty new and pretty unpopular topic. There were about a cohort of about 100 people on the course. There were about 8 of us that did that module on neural networks, and it was all very hypothetical. We thought this is a purely kind of academic exercise, and little did we know that fast forward 20, 25 years, then this would be making the sort of headlines that it's making particularly over the last 3 years since the public launch of ChatGPT. So obviously the scale's hugely different. These were very small neural networks, nothing like the scale that we have today. So been in and around this space in one form or another for all of my career, right? And graduated from my first degree into the workplace just in 2000, just as the web was about, the dot-com bubble had been growing and growing, was just about to burst. And I spent the next 4 years learning. I'd been learning some web development, doing that as a kind of side hustle, and then spent the next 4 years doing that as a job. And that was what we'd call full stack, front end, system admin, networking, databases, and everything in between, through to the front end. And that was a really interesting time, because we were making that shift to very data-driven websites. This is early noughties, and going from everything hand cranked into this world where we were putting out, collating all this structured data and putting this out into the web. And what struck me was we spent all this time curating all this beautifully structured data, and then it would be all that structure and richness would be lost when it got out onto the web. It might be formatted just as a table, an HTML table on a website, and then we'd spend loads of time trying to search engine optimize our sites to try and tell the search engines exactly what this content was. What is this data? Try and give as many kind of clues and hints to the search engines so that we could then perform well in the search rankings. So going from this very structured and very data intensive world to this one of almost no structure, and then through to all these kind of SEO tips and tricks and whatever, was the irony wasn't lost on me of that kind of contradiction there. So actually, around that time, there was this upswell in this idea, this concept of the semantic web. And what that was fundamentally about was around taking the semantics, the structure, the meaning of the data that we had behind the scenes, and then finding a way to expose that to the web so that search engines, web applications, users could benefit from the fact that we knew what this data and this content really, what it really was, what it really meant. Is this a review of a restaurant? Is it a description of a book? Is it a personal profile of someone? Is it a kind of an essay about some historical event? All of that richness. We found a way, and the standards bodies produce these mechanisms to convey that data in a structured way. And so that led me to say, right, quit the day job, go and do a PhD in computer science, and immerse myself in that space. And one of the things which your readers might be interested in following up on, if they haven't read it before, is an article from that era, 2001. It's called "The Semantic Web," and it's in Scientific American, in the science periodical. You can look it up online. You'll find a copy online. And fast forwarding another 20 years from that point, if you read it, it reads like a agent manifesto. A manifesto for agents that we now see coming to fruition. It's an amazing historical artifact. So,
so a lot of what's in that 20 odd years ago is actually being evidenced today.
Exactly. And having seen that kind of, so the AI world in those days was, there was the agents. There was a big strand of the research world around intelligent agents, and the agents folk from the research world will probably take issue with me saying this, but the semantic web world, the AI world, was deeply uncool. Like, it was of all the computer science disciplines or subfields, we were like the uncool ones. No one wanted.
How come?
Well,
what made it uncool?
Yeah, there'd been all these decades of overinflated expectations. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s into the 90s. All these big promises made about how AI would revolutionize the world, and it never materialized. So people got kind of tired of believing the hype, and then a few, core number of senior researchers that kind of held on to the vision, if you like, kept the belief, saw the community through that period. But it was not it was still remained deeply uncool, and everyone thought these agents is never going to work. It's a pipe dream, etc., etc. And when you read that Scientific American article, then what you understand is the connection, the vision that Tim Berners-Lee and the other authors were holding on to, was the power of data as an input, the structure and semantics around that data, and then the ability for that to feed into intelligent agents that can act on our behalf, because they can reason about different sources of data, different user intentions and requirements. If you stripped out a few little bits of the language, it would read like something that someone had published in 2024. So it's a really...
It's like the Simpsons. The Simpsons used to predict everything, didn't they?
Yeah,
they always got it right.
Exactly. So that's that kind of those formative experiences kind of led me to just stay very much in this space between the data world and the computer science and the AI, and the kind of emergence of data science, what we now think of as classic machine learning, kind of coming to the fore, and the focus on big data through the 2010s. And
interesting.
Yeah.
What kept you believing? Like, what were you seeing to to give you those reassurances, to keep the belief? Like, what? Talk to me about
Great. That's a great question. I think the it seemed to me so clear that um, the 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 data has value, and the kind of richness, the semantics, and the structure of that is a key part of how that value is realized, um, and that kind of sense that if we can harness this, combine that with the computational power in the cloud, the increasingly complex AI models, then we can really affect some meaningful change. One of the reasons I joined Arup was specifically to apply my skills and experience to the built and natural environment, sustainability. All of these themes which are so key to what we as a human race need to be able to respond
that.
to, and very much at the core of Arup's values. So that kind of sense of the belief of doing something meaningful in the world and through my skills was kind of what sustained me. But I realized that in that kind of in that noughties era we'd had this big vision, but no one had really kind of answered the question of why, or really kind of made the case of a compelling why. So there was too much kind of reliance on this notion of if we could just do these things X, Y, and Z, it would be great, wouldn't it? And what I've learned over that 20-year period is that you can't. That will only appeal to some people. That'll only bring some people on the journey. For others, it's got to be much more concrete, much more proximal, immediate, and the big picture vision just doesn't work every time. So audience.
So you've been thinking about this, how data and AI is going to become central to how organizations operate for a long time. And you mentioned before about neural networks and the fact that there was a very small cohort of you who actually took it seriously and how unpopular it was. So what differences were there between companies that you were working with your mindset of this will come into fruition, versus those who were non-believers? Like, what would you see as kind of some of the key obvious differences?
Yeah, that's a really hard question, because when I think back over the sorts of the companies I've worked in, big and small, and the organizations I've worked with, then there's really a really broad mix, right? In kind of late noughties, early 2010s, then we were working a lot with collaborating with big organizations, BBC, Thomson Reuters, Syngenta, big public and private corporations that were or big commercial and non-commercial organizations that got on board with this notion of making their data available. And then I spent some time at the Open Data Institute, a non-profit, which was very much about influencing and supporting governments, public sector, and the commercial sector to publish data. So it's kind of an unlikely coalition, if you like. Organizations driven very much by commercial means those that are driven more by a sense of public service and a public good. And then there's the search engines and the tech companies were big in the mix, because they saw the opportunity to enhance their search engine rankings and the user experience. So I think it's despite everything I said about the vision not always appealing to everyone, you've got to have someone who's able to take that slight leap of faith, and but they've got to be able to then lay out the stepping stones, the path, to say, right, this is where we get to, and this is why. But then drip feed those kind of stepping stones along the way, so that people can come along that journey. And I think it comes down that's the leadership challenge, to really understand the audience, understand what resonates with different kind of segments of your audience, and then combine the articulation of the opportunity and the value with this. But first, we're going to do this thing, right? We want to get over there, but first, we're going to take this step, and that's going to deliver value on the way, right? It's got value at every step.
Mhm. And when did you notice the shift from like you almost having to sell this vision to the stakeholders and the execs coming to you saying, we need this, we need to be doing this? When did you notice that shift?
Late 2022.
Okay. Quite recently.
Yeah, honestly, the the arrival in the public consciousness of ChatGPT has
Mm,
been absolutely transformative, in sense of that awareness and making it real for people. You know, it went almost overnight, and of course, there's a long, slow burn behind the scenes to get to that point, right? But
mhm.
for majority of people, it went overnight from AI is a thing that's about sci-fi and robots.
Yeah.
Or you've got to have a PhD in computer science to use AI, let alone build it, to something that is I can install an app on my phone that is AI, and AI of the
Mm,
most powerful nature. So
mm,
that's I could have spent another 100 years, influencing and crafting my message, and probably still not got the same overnight or scale of impact and increase in the momentum that came from ChatGPT just exploding into the public consciousness.
crazy. And how has that changed like how you approach your role then, Tom? Now it isn't a case of constantly trying to have to sell it and share your vision. How has that changed things?
Yeah, it's the why is still really important. That's it's kind of people. What I've noticed is that that overnight sensation. It wasn't. It was a sensation has created the space for the conversations to happen. It's made it much easier to have the right conversations with the rest of the senior leadership, with the rest of the exec cohort. You've got a foot in the door. You've got the time in people's agendas, but people still want to know why, and in a way that's tailored to their role, to their team, their remit, their mandate, and their organization. So, and the why
Mm,
varies quite significantly, by individuals and context. So there's what a lot of the work they did at Arup was really about boiling down um, that that notion of the why into three very simple kind of 3 to 4 very simple concepts or dimensions. One, efficiency. That's
mhm,
everyone's that's the gateway drug, if you like. That's the on ramp for people, um, and but it's not it's like necessary, but it's not sufficient. Like it can't really sustain you beyond the first wave of AI adoption. Like it might get you your first wave, or it might be your first wave, but then you've got to think beyond that to both like the quality of what you deliver, whatever kind of organization
mhm.
you are, you deliver, you provide something to your customers or stakeholders. Um, so you've got to think through that transition from efficiency, quality, and then innovation. Providing something to your clients, that your customers, that you couldn't provide before, and because of the ready availability of AI. And it's that sort of, once you get into that sort of space, then the differentiation of your offering really becomes very interesting, becomes much more defensible. Um,
Mm.
Efficiency is never going to differentiate from your competition. It's just going to keep you in the race. It's going to keep fueling you to stay competitive while you invest in those things that increase quality, that increase differentiation and innovation.
Yeah. And in terms of this differing of offering and the innovation piece, like what have you seen that you've been sort of proud of within your career? Like what kind of things have you worked on or delivered that has sort of tick those boxes?
Yeah. I mean, there's some. Even if we think back to pre, the mass availability of Gen AI, then some of the kind of classic um, AI applications, machine learning type applications that have been really excited by this. Some of the work that me and my team and colleagues in Arup did around computer vision applications. Um, remote sensing. There was a piece of work which the Arup team have done around using satellite imagery to basically classify urban fabric, like buildings, surfaces, structures, etc., from the point of view of heat.
Okay.
Because there's this thing called the urban heat island effect. If you experienced it yourself, if you're in a city, in the height of summer, it's going to be a few degrees warmer than the surrounding areas, just because of the build up of this, of the urban fabric, and that's increasingly becoming a major issue in cities as the climate gets hotter, and the extremes get more extreme. And we see every year there's reports of people losing their lives through heat stress, overexposure to heat, and not being able to find places to cool down. You see it. There's every summer there's stories in the press around this, and so
Oh,
this is a
wow.
very concrete application. Excuse the pun. Very concrete application of using satellite imagery, machine learning to classify those areas which are most susceptible in a city to this urban heat island effect and heat stress. You can't put a sensor on every building or every street to
Sure.
measure that. The only way you can do it at scale is to do it with that remote sensing imagery. And then you can say to a city authority, you can say, these are the areas which are most at risk. You can overlay it with, say, like socioeconomic data, demographics, to find areas where there's people are less able to pay for cooling, for example, or maybe older and more vulnerable. And you can affect some really meaningful change then, with the
Mm.
authorities to introduce structural measures in the city that reduce that risk of overexposure. So that's for me, a
Wow.
really amazing piece of work that we've done at Arup, and you can find there's lots of stuff online about that to search for that.
Mm.
Um, of the most cutting edge technology, or some of the most cutting edge technology, and some of the issues that we face as a human race as a result of the changing climate. So that's the
Mm.
sort of I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and say, like, I've used my skills for some meaningful purpose that in some small way contributes to providing those better outcomes for people.
Yeah, incredible. That's a really good use case as well. Things like that, you just, unless you're in that sort of industry, you just don't think about. You know, it's not on your mind, is it really? Wow, that sounds like a really interesting project. What are some of the ones where you've because I know, from speaking to other guests, a lot of these projects don't really take off. You,
Mhm.
you kind of get a lot of failure. So what have been, I guess, some of the bigger challenges that you face when you've been trying to take on use cases that haven't quite gone to plan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got a lovely example in mind. So, one of the first projects I did at Arup was a project in the aviation sector, which was there was an operate. I won't. I'll spare the audience the details. An operational issue in the aviation sector, and where we the client came to us and said, "We've got this operational issue. We think it's caused by X, Y, and Z. It tends to happen to occur under certain circumstances. Can you help us to to unpick that, to understand what's going on and how we can address that?" And then we did I think, a really lovely piece of analysis that actually took this very kind of seemingly dull, mundane operational issue and kind of traced that back through a range of other factors that got quite kind of strong kind of cultural drivers. Quite, it's very systemic. It was a very systemic problem with a very kind of mundane seeming kind of effect. The symptoms were very complex, and the effect seemed very very kind of simple and mundane. And so that was a really informative piece of work. And one of the things that taught me very starkly was that you can do the work, and but the organizational change required to translate that work into impact, um, it's got so many additional factors, and most of those lie outside your control. So
Mm.
switch from having to be doing the best possible, most robust data science work you can do using all sorts of ML techniques, um, to needing to really sharpen those skills around understanding organizational context, understanding business drivers, and collaborating with influencing the key stakeholders in a client organization who may themselves not even be aligned around, does this problem and what is the solution to this, and how can we affect that, budgets, resourcing, etc. So end to end, you've got to, as a data science specialist, a data specialist, and AI specialist, you've got to be able to think in that holistic fashion, end to end. Otherwise, you're in a kind of metaphorical cupboard building models that have no.
So looking at those two examples there, the one which has been super successful, the one that sort of stalled, like for people listening to the show, Tom, what advice would you give people who are trying to, make a difference, select use cases? Like, what should they be doing, to give themselves as much chance of success as possible? Like, what have you learned across those two different, use cases?
Yeah, I think there's you've got to start by, I think I've heard other guests of your podcast say similar. So I think I'm kind of speaking to the preaching to the choir here. The understanding the outcome you want to achieve, understanding the kind of readiness and ability of the how fertile is the ground, if you like, for what you want to deliver to affect some change, and understand all of those contributing factors and work backwards before you get anywhere near the tech. So, are we clear about the problem? Like, and this is one thing that's been, that you find when you work in a professional services environment, a consulting environment, then sometimes the client the client thinks that they have a sense of the problem, and then you can work with the client to say, actually, well, is that the real issue, or actually is it a kind of adjacent issue? You think it's an issue with apples, but actually it is apples, it's also pears, and you can kind of that refinement of the problem statement, and that building that shared understanding is if you haven't got that, then I would really encourage, I'd say to people, you can't proceed further. You mustn't proceed further, because the chance of success drop dramatically. And even if the project might be seen as successful on a technical basis, it's not going to produce the outcomes that you and your clients or stakeholders actually want. So it's science, it's scientific method. Refining your research question. You've got to be clear what you're testing before you try and test anything. So to refine the question, work backwards. How would I approach this? Have I got the data? Is it the right data that can actually answer the question?
So just on that then, so you mentioned like preaching to the choir, and you're quite right. A lot of the guests have sort of said similar, how you approach these things. I'd like to think that's because we've got some great guests on the show and they know what they're doing. But it's still an issue, right? A lot of projects still fail, despite people like yourself and previous guests. They kind of know the stepping stones. So why do you think there is still failure? And also, looking back at your experience, Tom, like, did you have people teaching you this, or do you sort of learn? Do you just make the mistakes and then you realize, oh, okay, that one didn't work because I didn't do enough, prep beforehand. I hadn't got the right stakeholder. Like, why are people still making the same mistakes, despite a lot of people we speak to know what the correct stepping stones are?
Yeah. No one sat me down and taught me this stuff. It came from a combination, I think, of bitter experience, first-hand experience, and the training I received in uni as a experimental psychologist. That it's a big messy world out there, right? You can't. It's not a lab environment. You've got to understand how to tease out some kind of signal from this big messy real world environment, and so I think that got me very focused on being really clear about what I'm trying to test or understand here. And then when it came to working with my colleagues in Arup and other organizations, other companies I've been in, then the number one thing that I would choose to teach people is not, here are all the different models you can use, different techniques you can use for ML applications or whatever. It's here's all the craft that you can, the stuff that the craft. It's not just the core technical skills; it's the craftspersonship that goes around being a really effective data scientist or AI specialist. So, and then you don't learn that in many online courses. You don't, most of the online stuff doesn't teach you that. It just teaches you the tech. So, so
So craft being, sorry, Tom, when you say craft, what just elaborate?
Yeah. So it's if you imagine like a woodworker or something like that, a kind of master crafts person, woodworker, been doing it for 20, 30 years versus someone who's just gone through the kind of first training, or driving. I don't know if you drive a car, but the old kind of saying that you pass your driving test and then you learn to drive.
Yeah.
And you kind of take risks as an experienced driver that you'd probably never take consciously as a novice driver, and you'd probably fail your test if you did that, but you've been doing it for 20, 30 years, and so you're making a calculated risk every time. It's that kind of broader understanding and awareness of the context that you operate within, and the other factors that come to bear on the particular topic beyond the simple execution, the technical execution. And that's so hard, that's so hard to learn. I, developed a course that I ran with colleagues in Arup of, trying to compress like 20 years of hands-on practice into a program over the course of, 8 to 10 weeks to try and accelerate that process of people understanding. Yes, you might be able to write, choose the most appropriate models, write the best code, train the models, but to get to that point quicker, there's these other things that you can accelerate. The other kind of craft skills. So, so I mean, that you asked before, like, why are people still making mistakes? I do think it's getting loads better. I do think it's improving, and a lot of that is about the scale of investment that's happening. So, companies, organizations are investing increasing amounts in this, and therefore the scrutiny of how those investments are being spent, the value that they're delivering, and the sustainability of the business impact of that and the sustainability of that is becoming a much more, well, it's the first question, right? What's it going to cost and what value am I going to get?
Yeah.
So I think that's causing everyone to sharpen their tools, sharpen their thinking, and try and avoid costly mistakes. The challenge with that is sometimes that it can become too reductive. It's too the kind of room for maneuver and experimentation can become too restrictive. So where the right balance is, it's for each organization to decide for themselves.
And how do you work out that cost versus ROI? Like what's the process to get there?
Yeah, well, thinking back to that notion of like efficiency, quality, innovation, risk reduction, then the calcs are different in each of those, depending on which of those areas you're kind of choosing to look at or focus on, and they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can have something that's an efficiency gain now, but quickly produces opens a door for something more innovative and differentiated. But the calcs and the drive ROI assessments on each of those is different, right? Because if it's increasing efficiency of an existing process, right? That's you broadly know what the process is now. You broadly know what it costs, or you can find you can calculate that. And so then it's a question of like, well, is this a 5% efficiency increase, of 25%? And you can have some reasonable best estimates of that, and that's great. You can demonstrate your ROI in quite kind of simple, 10x, 50x, 2x, whatever. When it comes to thinking about innovation, new opportunities, new forms of value that you can deliver into the market, then it's much harder, because you're looking at
Mm.
not making pies more efficiently, but making bigger pies or new types of pies or new cakes as well as pies. It's there's and you just don't know. You have to then think about what is the size of this market that's not being fully addressed, or how do we actually create a new market in the first place, and market making for unmet user needs or unmet customer needs. And that's a much harder sell, because it's you've got to take more of a gamble, and your investment may pay off 1,000 times, 10,000 times, or it may not pay off at all. And,
Mm-hmm.
but then if you think about all of the kind of sorts of new things that have entered the market over the last 20, 30 years, tech driven stuff, then if I mean, pick on Facebook, a really kind of mundane example, but who knew that we needed or wanted or we're going to get
Yeah.
Facebook. If you did an ROI calc for that, then the margin for error becomes so much larger in that space.
Mm.
So that's where the combination of you got to if you can de-risk, if you can take investments and initiatives that de-risk the high risk stuff by delivering some of the more predictable elements, then that's a nice at a portfolio level you can balance that risk, because you can say, well, we're going to pay back the investment through efficiency gains that then also creates all of this new this additional ROI, which in the first wave is less tangible. You can't necessarily
Mm-hmm.
or you can't necessarily realize it for 1, 2, 3 financial years, or cycles, whatever. But you've kind of got it for free off the back of doing the
Yeah.
the efficiency gains.
And I suspect as well, you probably don't really know the true cost or the true ROI until you're, getting stuck into it.
Absolutely, and so many of this is the kind of the unsquarable circle, that actually,
Mm.
if you as a leader of an organization, if you believe that the ongoing and future success of the organization is predicated on being effective with AI, and I think in most organizations that's true to a moderate or modest or very large extent, then you've got to recognize that requires investment in that fundamental capability building, and then that's not a question of ROI, it's a question of measurement. How do we actually, the ROI is real, but it's just very hard to measure it. So because it's diffused through a whole range of everyday, small scale, everyday changes to people's ways of working, behaviors, risk appetite, etc., which individually they're almost impossible to measure, but collectively the compounding of that, positive compounding of that over the course of months and years is phenomenal. And it's only through that sort of large scale, particularly for we're talking about particularly knowledge economy organizations, then but also more transactional ones, but that ability to really bring that workforce on that journey is the thing that creates ROI on a level that's wildly unpredictable. It's almost like examples, like if you do that, then the opportunities for real innovation, transformative innovation, is become much greater. But you just can't. Your ability to perceive what they will be becomes much less.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, interesting. And so, Tommy, you finished up with Arup, didn't you? You've been there, what, 10 years?
Just shy of 10
just under
years.
10 years?
Yeah. Wrapped up
So, kind of left last month?
last month. Yeah.
So what's
What's next?
next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing time to be working in AI. It's like back to the start of the episode. Then I thought that I'd lived through my major wave, having been around in the web space. In the late 90s and early noughties. But here I am, get another wave. So it's and this is bigger, right? This is bigger than the web. This this is it.
Yeah.
So I start a new role next week, a chief data and AI officer for another consultancy in the same sector, um,
Oh,
and
amazing.
but I'm also leaving myself time around that to explore all sorts of new avenues and opportunities, because this space is moving, as you know, like at a even faster than most of us even would ever have actually predicted. So, um,
Hmm.
for me, the key principles and values are make a meaningful impact, support organisations to change, to navigate successfully this space. I'm super interested in professional services, because I think at a like national economy level, then the service sector is structurally very important for us, in the
Totally.
UK. And I also think that there's within professional services, there's such a strong, prominent um, role for data and knowledge. And so much of the data, the data might be captured. Some, a lot of it's already captured. A lot of it isn't. But the knowledge is so tacit. And what we're seeing with generative AI in particular is that kind of that very kind of after many years of disruption of other sectors through machine learning and AI, then professional services is kind of facing this really interesting period of amazing opportunity, but quite a lot of turbulence along the way, because
Mm.
Gen AI is starting to kind of make its presence felt in in various different professional services sectors. So I'm super interested in that, um,
Mm.
and also smaller companies. I'm really interested in supporting smaller companies to navigate this, because big multinationals, there is the resource to invest, but it's not always clear.
Okay.
Smaller companies that aren't startups or tech companies necessarily have the the head start to invest
Mm.
in and navigate that. So when I think about my contribution in the world, then supporting the supporting small and medium sized companies as well as large corporates is a personal interest and commitment of mine.
Mm. Totally. Oh well, good luck in the new role. So is that interim, or
That's
is
an
that
interim role, yeah, to support
yeah,
that
yeah.
firm on their journey, getting started, getting the foundations laid, much like I did at Arup, but over a shorter time frame, and
Hmm.
designing, with them what does the new kind of AI themed operating model look like, um,
Hmm.
so that
Hmm.
you know once I'm not around to do that day to day, that's got to again capability building and capacity building expertise. Leaving a legacy
Okay.
in that organisation of self sufficiency and vision and clarity.
So what would be the most important priorities then going into that role? First sort of 90 days. I appreciate you're not feet under the table yet. So, but whilst you're planning and ahead of you starting, like what are you thinking about right now, kind of going into that role?
There's obviously a important discovery phase, baselining, level setting. What's the current operating? What's the starting point that organization's coming from, and really understanding that. Really clarifying the nature and degree of the exec appetite, with the rest of the exec team. What's the how um, what are people excited about? What are people's concerns? What are the kind of how does the kind of the vision and the opportunity, how is that supported by operational reality day to day, and how is that at what point is that kind of in conflict with
Hmm.
hard operational realities? So that's all part of the discovery and the kind of level setting exercise, and then it comes back again to this thing like what's the value case for that organization that guides what the roadmap looks like. So is
Okay.
it, do we start with something around immediate term efficiency gains and then progress to other stuff? Do we run different initiatives in parallel that speak to efficiency, quality, and innovation? And we can parallelize those things, right? Because there are different parts of the business that have got different needs and different market dynamics. So it's really about taking that baseline understanding, clarifying clarifying the vision, and then again stepping back, working backwards from there to say what's the roadmap and plan look like that's going to deliver that over, or at least create deliver the first phase of that over say 12 months. So
brilliant.
Yeah,
exciting.
super exciting.
You didn't get much downtime, did you?
Well, it was a lovely. I had a lovely little bit of time off to just be with the family and explore some other non-AI interests, but also I couldn't resist getting back in deeper into the tech. So
yeah. I've worked with a lot of contractors over my career, and it's funny how often they'll say, I'm going to take a bit of time out now. I've just finished a 12, 18-month gig, and then a week later I'll ring them and go, I've got this. Yeah, go on then. Sounds good.
Exactly. I mean, passion. You've got to have the passion, right? Otherwise, it's not going to sustain.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, well, good luck, Tom, with that. Anything else? I'll just give you the floor. Anything that we you'd like to cover off? Anything that I didn't sort of cover with you that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I think there's loads of other stuff we could talk about. I think we've had a great conversation now. It's it's been. Thank you for the chance to kind of think back and reflect on and kind of crystallize some of my own thoughts and kind of own particular take on where we've come from and where we're headed. This is like it is still the end of the beginning, right? And we don't really know what's to follow, but we've got to. I think for me, being clear collectively about our values and expectations around AI is really critical, and ensuring that the kind of ethical and ethical and legal and societal frameworks around AI are that we do everything we can to ensure they keep pace with the tech, because I think that's we've seen cases of where it's always the case with tech, right? The tech always outpaces the ability of legal frameworks, ethical frameworks, whatever, to it can never keep pace. But I think we've seen cases of AI being used in ways which I don't think are beneficial for society or the human race more broadly. And I think those of us that are kind of understand the tech deeply and have a particular slant on how we should act as human beings in a civilized society. I think we have a kind of a responsibility to stand up and advocate for a values centric, values oriented approach to AI. Even values vary, right? There's a breadth of views, but I think there's some basic kind of societal norms which we need to ensure a very present part of the conversation.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, good way to finish. And I'm really pleased that it allowed you that time to reflect as well, because I think people in in your role, it's just kind of head down, move forward, isn't it? And I'm pleased that this gives people like yourself, Tom, that platform to be able to reflect and take a moment of sort of pride in their career. And I have achieved a lot and I've come a long way, and I'm glad that that's given you that sort of sense of reflection. So yeah, great having you on the show, Tom. Appreciate your time. Good luck in the new role, and thanks everyone to listening who's tuned in today.
Yeah, great, thank you all. Thanks for inviting me down. It's been a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. Cheers. Thanks, Tom. Bye, everyone.